and welcome to the 6 o'clock news, reporting live to you. I'm Rebecca Walker. With the Reserve Bank saying debt is higher than ever before, we have a special broadcast tonight. Consumer debt in a world of Afterpay. Headlines have been floating around recently regarding Afterpay. Headlines such as Afterpay ads encouraging millennials to get into debt must stop, and Afterpay slammed as predatory by customers after $28 million profit from late fees. But isn't it great that there are so many ways to pay? Do consumers just need to be more responsible with what and how much they're spending? We asked our expert, Michaela Smith.
Afterpay is the latest purchasing method that allows you to receive your goods before you have paid for them, hence the slogan, buy now, pay later. So why is Afterpay so popular? And how does it encourage people to pursue harmful shopping habits like compulsive consumption? What actually is this idea of compulsive consumption?
That's a great question. Consumption has always been thought of as the using up of something, but in modern society, one only needs to use it to be classified as consumption. Faber and O'Guen said compulsive consumption is seen to be an uncontrollable drive or desire to purchase possessions repeatedly, which may eventually cause harm to the individual or others. This type of purchasing behaviour may come on gradually and can stem from many different things in one's life. However, the consequences almost always end the same: debt, breakdown in relationships, and guilt. It really is just like an addiction.
So Michaela, why should we be wary of Afterpay?
Well, see, Afterpay is a beautiful tool if used correctly. When we look at the Afterpay website, we're greeted by a variety of designer brands and are fascinated by the idea that we can have the product we want now and just pay for it later. See, Afterpay doesn't allow you to buy your bread and butter, things that we actually need in our lives. Instead, it offers a price plan for us to buy expensive handbags and designer dresses, many of us that actually can't afford. Unfortunately, some people just can't say no to purchasing, and Afterpay has no regulations in place to stop people from signing up that have these destructive behaviours. A colleague of mine, McGowan, warns that the lack of regulation around Afterpay sign-up requirements may be leading consumers to making purchases they really can't afford on items they don't really need. All you need for Afterpay is a card number. This means that Afterpay is not required to look into whether or not an individual actually can or cannot afford to make these repayments, also adding late fees of up to $68 per order. The only reasonable spending feature Afterpay implicates is cutting a customer off from a new order until their account is paid. I'm sure you can see how this all seems very appealing to someone who is a compulsive consumer.
Absolutely. So what can consumers do to make sure they don't fall victim to Afterpay?
Pretty simple, Rebecca. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. Debt is dangerous and should be used carefully. From the New Zealand Statistic website, in 2015, 50% of people over the age of 15 had some form of debt. Within the statistic, the average debt per person was $75,000. And this type of debt can easily be avoided if common things such as Afterpay weren't used. If you think about it, you could save the 4 equal payments yourself and then just buy the product. That way, you are not locked into debt. For those who have traits of compulsive consumption, they really need to focus on improving the aspects of their lives which are leading to these types of behaviours. Controlling purchases will help them not fall into the Afterpay trap.
That's really fascinating. We've actually got a couple of interviews here and we're wondering if you could shed some light on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you used Afterpay before?
Yes.
What did you buy?
A Yumi handbag.
How did you hear about Afterpay?
I got to the checkout when I was going to buy the handbag and there was a little Afterpay symbol. So I clicked on what is this and it told me about it.
What made you decide to use Afterpay?
I thought that instead of spending the $600 all at once, it'd be easier to justify if I did it over 4 payments rather than just all at once.
Would you use Afterpay in store?
No.
Why not?
I don't want to look like I couldn't afford to pay it.
What happens when you don't or can't pay an instalment?
I don't know, maybe I assume you'd probably get charged a late fee. Something like that.
Thoughts on debt as a concept?
if you can't afford to pay it, you probably shouldn't buy it. I guess debt is good in situations where you desperately need something, but other than that, yeah, I don't like to delve into it.
What's your take on this, Michaela?
Well, what I'm seeing here are some warning signs of compulsive consumption. The presence of compulsive consumption patterns warns that this consumer behaviour could take a dark turn and get them into problems, such as debt. This type of shopping in excess can lead to crippling debt, which can be difficult to get out of, all from delaying the responsibility of actually paying for their debt that they have. This interesting thing with Afterpay and compulsive consumption is that it isn't at all necessary items. It's almost all based on wants rather than needs. You can hear this through the consumer saying things such as only incur debt if it's something that you really need, which goes to show that maybe she doesn't even realise her own spending habits when she's purchasing the want item, such as her handbag.
Wow, thanks for that insight, Michaela. We actually have another interview here from a salesperson's perspective we'd love for you to look at.
Of course.
Do you encourage use of Afterpay where you work?
Yeah, definitely.
And how do you do this?
Especially if someone wants to buy like a couple of our products, we'll push for Afterpay instead of having to pay the whole amount, so it doesn't seem like such a huge purchase.
Do many people use it?
A fair few people do. We definitely try to encourage it and push our customers to use it.
And do you find people buy more when they use Afterpay compared to when they purchase their products up front?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you ever think that the people using Afterpay actually can't afford the things they're buying?
I like to think they can afford it.
Do you know what happens when people can't afford to pay their Afterpay bills?
We get chased up or something like that.
Have you heard of compulsive consumption?
Yeah, sort of.
And do you think people who you serve at work are compulsive consumers?
Given their purchasing history at our store, I would definitely consider some of them compulsive consumers.
And so how do you see the retailer's part in all this?
I definitely believe the retailer is encouraging this type of behaviour. It seems to even be actively insisted by the retailer that they should be pushing for this type of payment method. In the eye of the retailer, they are getting the sale. In the eye of the consumer, they are delaying the idea of paying for the item that they have just purchased. This very clearly and worryingly links in with the idea that compulsive consumption is based around the purchase of the product rather than the possession. For a consumer who is already in debt, this can enable the fact of compulsive consumption. The makeup retailer MAC has even reported that sales have increased by 14% just by encouraging customers to use Afterpay. I found it really interesting that the retailer either didn't know or is choosing not to see that they are contributing to the harmful cycle. When they said they push for Afterpay and that people buy more when they use Afterpay, I definitely could have seen how compulsive consumption is thriving in this retail environment.
So what can we expect to see from someone that's a compulsive consumer and uses Afterpay?
Another great question. Buying multiple products, for example, the same pair of shoes in all of the different colours, is a sign of compulsive consumption. The consumer is thinking, what if I need them later? As we heard from this retailer, Afterpay can be a device to encourage consumers to buy multiple products in one transaction. The consumer is feeling elated because despite being strapped for cash, they are able to walk away and get the high that they wanted without having to actually pay a cent. They made the purchase and took away their new products without actually purchasing them at all.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on this, we really appreciate it. So tonight we've discovered the risks that come with payment methods such as Afterpay, how Afterpay is fueling compulsive consumption, and how the modern day is getting into debt. Some fascinating discoveries from consumers and salespeople have shown just how easily we can get hooked and how they hook us. Tomorrow night, we'll be talking about the New Zealand poverty line and talking to the families of children who can't afford breakfast. And that's news tonight. I'm Rebecca Walker. Good night.